Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Babysitter's Eyes. Small towns are often cloaked in a comforting veil of predictability, the kind that lulls you into thinking nothing truly bizarre can ever happen within their neat rows of houses and manicured lawns. But in the heart of Linden Grove, something restless took root in a house on Maple Street, and the innocence of suburbia cracked like shattered glass. It was here that the Watts family lived, Sarah and Mark, typical hard-working parents, and their two children, Emily and Jacob. Both were bright, imaginative, and, as their parents often reminded them, somewhat sensitive to strange things, or so they joked. The Watts family had recently hired a babysitter. Her name was Miss Elaine, a quiet woman in her mid-20s with a soft smile and a gaze that held an unusual intensity. From the beginning, Emily had been unnerved by Miss Elaine's eyes. They weren't just a strange color, they seemed to change. At first, Emily thought it was a trick of the light, but the more she stared, the more she noticed a pattern. Miss Elaine's eyes, normally a pale, almost translucent gray, shifted hues, deepening in color based on what she was feeling or thinking. When she was simply watching Emily and Jacob, the eyes softened, turning a pale silver shade, almost gentle. But when she was planning something that felt calculated, the color darkened, a stormy indigo, almost black, swirling like ink in water. Emily tried to tell her brother, but Jacob dismissed it. "It's just your imagination." Even when Emily insisted, he would only shudder and look away, as if something invisible terrified him. The first evening. It was a chilly autumn evening, and the lights inside the Watts household flickered softly, casting long shadows along the walls. Mark and Sarah had left for their weekly date night, entrusting the children to Miss Elaine for a few hours. Emily sat curled up on the couch, clutching a blanket as the babysitter supervised. Miss Elaine moved with fluid precision, pouring juice carefully, tidying toys with meticulous hands. But every movement was accompanied by those eyes. Emily watched as Miss Elaine's gaze fell on her and Jacob. For a long moment, her eyes were silver, calm and watchful. Then, when she turned away to pick up a toy that had fallen beneath the coffee table, her eyes darkened, shifting to that deep indigo color that made Emily's skin prick with unease. That night, Emily lay in bed, eyes wide. She thrust her blankets over her head, trying to shut out the memory of those changing eyes. But sleep evaded her. The next day. The next afternoon, Emily confided in her mother. Sarah listened patiently but chalked it up to a product of Emily's active imagination, especially since the babysitter had been kind and attentive in every other regard. "Sometimes grown-ups' eyes seem to change colors in the light," Sarah said kindly. "Maybe that's what you're seeing." But when Miss Elaine came that evening, Jacob wouldn't come down from his room. His cheeks were pale, and his eyes darted nervously off into corners, as though shadows held secrets he was too frightened to reveal. When Emily asked him what was wrong, he whispered, "She watches us differently now. Like she's thinking about things." The Watcher's Ritual. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. Emily started noticing the babysitter's eyes more and more, especially during quiet moments when Miss Elaine was planning, a calculating, distant stare, her gaze shifting to that unsettling indigo. Sometimes, Emily caught her muttering under her breath, her lips barely moving, words incomprehensible but filled with a sinister calm. Jacob's fear deepened. He refused to be in the same room alone with Miss Elaine. At night, he spoke of dark figures lurking in the corners, and how he heard whispers breathing through the walls. Mark and Sarah began to suspect that the children were overreacting, but something gnawed at their minds, a restless feeling best left unspoken. One evening, Emily hid behind the staircase, watching silently as Miss Elaine moved through the living room. Her eyes flickered from silver to indigo, and Emily caught a flicker of something in those dark depths, a slow, deliberate smile curling Elaine's lips as if whatever she was planning was already set into motion. The break. Late one night, as rain pelted the windows, Emily awakened with a start. Something was wrong. The house was too quiet. She slipped from her bed and peeked through the crack of her door. Downstairs, the floorboards creaked softly under Miss Elaine's feet. The babysitter was in the living room, sitting cross-legged in front of the fireplace that wasn't even lit. Her eyes were neither silver nor indigo. They were a glowing, shifting mix of colors that no human eyes should ever hold. Flames of gold, molten red, and obsidian black danced inside them, mesmerizing and entirely unnatural. Miss Elaine traced strange symbols onto the floor around her with a finger, her voice low and hypnotic. Emily's heart thundered, but her feet refused to move. She was frozen by a fear deeper than anything she had ever known. Elaine's voice rose into a chant, the syllables twisting in the air like a black mist. The room grew colder, the shadows thicker. The walls seemed to bend inward. Suddenly, the chant halted, and Elaine's eyes locked onto Emily, glowing with a furious intensity that was almost unbearable. Yet, for a moment, those terrifying eyes softened into the familiar silver hue, and Emily saw something else, something like sorrow or regret buried deep beneath. The revelation. The next morning, Emily told her parents everything. About the eyes, the chanting, and the symbols on the floor. Mark and Sarah, alarmed, confronted Miss Elaine. The babysitter's smile did not waver, but her eyes shifted, from silver to dark and stormy indigo, and there was a shiver in the air. "I'm sorry you felt frightened," she said softly. "But I cannot stay here any longer. This house is not safe. Not while the dark reaches within." Those words confused them, but before they could respond, Miss Elaine gathered her things and left, her eyes briefly flickering to that impossible swirling storm before closing the door behind her. The aftermath. The family changed babysitters, and slowly, the children's fears waned, but the memory of Miss Elaine's eyes never did. Both Emily and Jacob, now older, sometimes caught themselves staring into mirrors, watching their own eyes, wondering if somewhere within them, they carried traces of that strange, shifting color. The other mystery, why Miss Elaine had left so suddenly, remained unanswered. No one knew her past, and no one ever saw her again. At night, when the wind sighed through the trees on Maple Street, Emily sometimes thought she heard the echo of a soft chant, an almost imperceptible voice whispering secrets into the darkness. Epilogue. A mirror's warning. Years later, Emily sat in a dimly lit room, the sunlight fading outside. She shuffled through an old box filled with keepsakes when her gaze caught something curiously familiar. A photograph of Miss Elaine from the day they first met. The smiling babysitter stared from the paper, her pale gray eyes almost serene. But as Emily looked closer, an icy chill gripped her, the eyes in the photo flickered. They shifted from silver to indigo and back. Emily dropped the photo into the box and stared at her own reflection in the darkened windowpane. For a long moment, her own eyes gleamed, flickering with something neither childlike nor human. The babysitter's eyes were not just a strange curiosity or a trick of light. They were a warning, for in the end, some watchers do not merely observe, they choose. And their eyes tell tales far darker than any child should ever know. For more stories, like and subscribe.